What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Saturdays in the SEC, episode 108. We're back from a little hiatus. It's been about 3 weeks since we had our last podcast, and it was actually the night Nick Saban retired. Obviously, we had our emergency podcast and had a lot of personal stuff going on the last few weeks for both of us, but it's good to be back, and we haven't even had the chance to break down the Kalen DeBoer hire at Alabama. Um, if you're looking at our channel over the last week or so, Dan Lanning is still our hottest candidate. So it's nice to get on and finally be able to talk about the DeBoer hire at Alabama and all the staff changes going on there. Auburn's had a bunch of staff changes just around the league as a whole. We got February signing day coming up here in just a few days. So that'll be super interesting. A lot of news around college football off the field with not really realignment talk, but as we all know, that's still on the horizon. There's still more things to kind of turn in that scenario. So I think we're still a long way from that being settled completely. And I think we could get some news on that, before next season, certainly. But that's kind of an ever evolving situation. And then we're going to talk about SEC quarterbacks. Go ahead and kind of dive into that a little bit, just kind of looking through the list of potential SEC starters this year. You look at the guys that are, returning. You've got some great returning starters, adding some new guys to the league, and Quinn Ewers, Jackson Arnold, then the upside of some of these young guys. So we're going to dive into that a little bit later as well. And kind of get excited for next season. But got to break down this Kalen DeBoer hire at Alabama, and kind of break down the timeline of how that unfolded. It ultimately didn't take Alabama long, Greg Byrne, to find his next guy. A lot of reports out there, and I do want to give credit where it's due. Jimmy Sexton, super agent of college football, played this about as well as you could possibly play it. He not only his main client and Nick Saban retired, he got several of his other clients big raises along the way, and then got one of his other clients, Kalen DeBoer, ended up getting the job. So, he played that about as beautifully as you could. But a lot of reports, and obviously in our last episode, the night that this happened, that Saban's retirement happened, Dan Lanning was the first name that surfaced. Almost instantly within 10, 15 minutes of this happening. And he was always a hot target for when that did happen. But, I mean, just according to reports and what people have said, I'm sure there was some interest there, and I'm sure there was maybe, Greg Byrne and his camp reaching out, but I don't think it ever got very far at all. It certainly was never close to happening. He's very, happy with what he's building at Oregon, and he should be. They're really got a lot of momentum going. So I don't think that ever got off the ground, and I really don't think the Alabama interest never met what the media's perceived interest was in that, because turns out Greg Byrne was actually in Washington meeting with Kalen DeBoer the following day. So this was a guy that, okay, you may not say he's the number one guy. Obviously, there was some contact with Kirby Smart's camp, Steve Sarkisian. Like, obviously, you're going to gauge the interest to see if there's any possibility. Neither one of those ever got off the ground either. Both those guys are building great programs. Obviously, we know what Kirby's done, and Sarkisian's kind of on his way to building, and already is building an elite program at Texas. So, to me, DeBoer kind of became the front runner pretty quickly. Obviously, this all happened within 72 hours, but kind of tying Jimmy Sexton into this, though. Mike Norvell, you saw his name get thrown in there. Obviously, got him a big raise, and he's staying at Florida State. DeBoer ended up getting the job. That's another Jimmy Sexton client. So, and obviously Lanning, he got. I don't know if he got a new deal, or if not, he probably will soon anyway. So he was able to kind of parlay that for him and set himself up for the future. So a lot of guys were able to kind of use this job as a little bit of a decoy, I guess, to better themselves, and kudos to them for doing that. But just a couple weeks in now to the DeBoer era. I really like the staff that he's put together so far. Very a lot of Washington flavor on the offensive side of the ball, which is I think what people would expect. Bringing over Ryan Grubb, and actually in the last few days he's kind of been rumored for the Seahawks OC job, so we'll see kind of what happens there, and I think we'll get a resolution on that soon. But bringing over Nick Sheridan, the tight ends coach from Washington, Sam Huff, offensive line, Jamarcus Shepard, wide receivers. So obviously that offense was one of the best in the country. So I figured a lot of those guys would follow him down to Tuscaloosa. I like him keeping some of the old staff, Robert Gillespie in particular, Freddie Roach. They coach running backs and D line, respectively there. I think it was good to keep both those guys on staff. Very good recruiters. Roach has been around the Alabama program a long time. And then a lot of guys stayed in the kind of the support staff role off the field. David Ballou with strength and conditioning. Jeff Allen, in the training staff side that been there Saban's whole tenure. So, and then brought some guys from the outside on the defensive side of the ball. From Wisconsin, Colin Hitcher, I think is how you pronounce his name. He's at Wisconsin. He actually coached Sauce Gardner and those guys, and Kobe Bryant at Cincinnati when they had that elite secondary. So a lot of guys, and got Kane Womack, obviously, from South Alabama, who's a head coach. So I thought he got some guys from other programs that had good track records, but those guys also had ties to the South and the SEC. So I think it's a good mix of, guys from his Washington staff, specifically offensively, keeping some of the current guys, and then also bringing in other guys from around the country and specifically with SEC ties. So, so far, so good. I really like the staff he put together. I think maybe top to bottom, I think it's as good or maybe better than Saban's last couple staffs, honestly, just from the assistant coaching staff perspective. So, and the coordinators, I think Ryan Grubb, if he stays especially, is one of the best in the country, and hopefully he'll stick around. But very impressed with what he's done so far. Was able to keep Ryan Williams in the fold, which was huge, a huge win for him to start off the new era, and was able to keep most of the recruiting class intact. Lost a few guys. Transfer portal wise was a little bit more so, but I think it wasn't quite as bad as maybe what people make it out to be, just because I think when you look under the surface, a guy like Isaiah Bond goes to Texas. Caden Proctor goes to Iowa. Caleb Downs goes to Ohio State. Speaking on Bond and Proctor specifically, those were guys, and I had heard even prior to Saban's retirement, they were very close to entering the portal before Saban retired. So I don't think it was a biggest shock. I was kind of expecting those guys probably to leave once he retired. Downs, to me, is obviously the biggest loss, the most irreplaceable loss. Most of the guys are depth pieces. Outside of Proctor, Bond would have loved to have kept, but I really didn't expect those guys to stay after the retirement announcement. But Downs was the big one. Thought he was going to Georgia, but ends up having, really strong relationships at Ohio State, and they were able to pry him away from Georgia, who was kind of considered the heavy favorite once T-Rob left Tuscaloosa and went to Athens. So, but all in all, I think when you consider the fact that you had the GOAT, the greatest of all time, leave, and you didn't lose any more than what you lost, I consider that a pretty big win, honestly, because I honestly thought it would be more than that. So their portal window's closing soon, the 30 days, and that's kind of a whole nother, situation, because when you're talking about a coach stepping away and the previous portal window's closing, you've got every program in the country that's able to have an open season on your roster for 30 days, and there's no way to defend yourself because it's hard for you at that current time to go pluck anybody else. Luckily, DeBoer being from Washington were able to get some guys from their pieces that they think can play, at the SEC level. But, it's not that way everywhere else. So that was kind of a tough situation. But all in all, I think he handled it pretty well, about as well as you could hope for, considering the circumstances. But I want to get your thoughts on the DeBoer hire and kind of staff so far, and then you can kind of get into the Auburn staff situation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest hire for him, the most home run hire, is Womack getting another head coach in there who not necessarily for the SEC aspect, but understanding the recruiting from down here in the state of Alabama. He's probably had some relationships and has some relationships formed with some high school coaches around the areas that Alabama is going to be recruiting. Obviously, DeBoer does not have those relationships built that Womack does. So I think that was probably his biggest hire, in my opinion, just on the recruiting aspect side. I do want to say I haven't shared my opinions with the listeners. Obviously, I've shared them with you. I think that, this can go any way with any coach you hire, obviously, the 50-50. I just think that I've said this multiple times. You don't want to be the guy that follows Saban. You want to be the guy that follows that guy. So you want to be the guy that the coach wants to be the guy that follows DeBoer, in my opinion, at a situation like this. Now, can DeBoer handle it? Absolutely. I think he can. I think he's a great coach. He's done nothing but been successful everywhere he's been. You can't deny that. Football's the same everywhere. It's the players that differ, but football, the game of football, the schemes and how he operates his teams and his program, that doesn't change place to place wherever you go. It's still football. It's still the same game, 60 minutes, 100-yard field, 53.5 yards wide. It's all the same. 10 yards for a first down. Nothing changes. So I think he's going to be successful because, like you said, his roster that he's got, the guys he's brought in to replace and patch holes that was necessary. I do think that in Alabama standards, his first year is probably not going to be what the fans want it to be. I think he'll win 9-10 games. I don't know that he'll go to the SEC championship game. And I hope for the sake of him and the program that the fans don't get too uptight about that, because year one, he's not obviously going to compete for a championship like a Brian Kelly did at LSU, So I just think that it might be obviously it's a tougher coaching job to have than Washington. But I think obviously he can handle it because no matter what level he's been at, like I said, he's been successful. I think it could be a very, very, very short tenure for sure. I think it has a possibility to be a very short tenure, but I also think that it could be a very long tenure as well because, like I've said, he is a fantastic coach. He knows what he's doing, and he's done the right things staff-wise, getting the right guys in there, keeping some guys that was on the staff to keep the relationships with the guys that's already on the team, and helping you build those relationships with the guys that you're now coaching that you've never had any contact with at all. And then obviously bringing in his guys from Washington and some other guys from around college football. So I think he's going to do fine, and I think he's going to be successful, but successful to a normal college football coach, and it's successful for an Alabama college football coach. It's different. It just is. It is the way it is. Thank you, Nick Saban, for doing that. But you have he set the bar really high. Obviously, no coach in the history of college football is going to reach that standard ever again. There may be some come close, but no one is ever going to reach that level of success that Nick Saban has reached. So I think that how fans and in Alabama are going to be judging him may not be fair as it should be in these first few years. But I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to find his way. He wants to run it and do the things his way. And obviously asking his other coaches that he's brought in, like the Womacks, and that's been a head coach before at a program, that definitely helps take a little bit of pressure off of him and a little weight off of his shoulders for sure. But moving to Auburn and Hugh Freeze and what he's doing year one to year two in the offseason and fixing his staff and changing things up on his staff, I think Hugh Freeze has done some things that has been needing to happen for a few years. Obviously, you don't want to come in fresh off your first year and clean house 100% as soon as you get the job. You've got, like I was just talking about with DeBoer, you've got to keep some of the camaraderie with the guys and the coaches that's been there and has recruited these guys and built relationships with them. So I think that he was kind of pigeonholed in that last year. Hugh Freeze was when he got the job. He didn't want to disrupt too much. He wanted to, build a foundation, and you got to have some guys and some trust there to start building that foundation. But he's gone out, and Wes McGriff, DB coach and secondary coach and cornerbacks coach, he was there last year, and then him and Ron Roberts did not get along. He ended up moving himself to off the field, and then he left and took another job. And then they got rid of Ron Roberts, and Hugh Freeze gave him a call, and he came right back, which is huge. Now, Zach Etheridge, who was the DB coach or associate DB coach, whatever you want to call him, he was a big-time recruiter for Auburn. He has been kicked to the curb. He went back to Houston, where he was 3 or 4 years ago. He was at Houston, then Georgia Tech, and then I believe came to Auburn. But he's been at Houston before, so this is his second stint at Houston. And Trevon Reed has left, and he is now the DB coach at UCF. Both of those guys were pretty big for recruiting in Auburn or for Auburn. But I think the additions he's made with DJ Durkin, a former head coach as well, that definitely helps. And having Charles Kelly come in. Charles Kelly's going to be the co-defensive coordinator. That hire was made a couple months ago, and then DJ Durkin was made last week. He's going to be the defensive coordinator. And he also brought in Derek Nix, who was going to be Auburn's offensive coordinator. I believe Hugh Freeze is going to call plays, but Derek Nix is going to be Auburn's offensive coordinator and running backs coach. He played running back for Southern Miss in the early 2000s, and then coached for them as a grad assistant, and then worked his way up. In the last 16 years, he's been at Ole Miss. He's been the running backs coach and receivers coach in different stint, obviously through the 16 years, but he's had different roles with the team. Obviously, fantastic play caller, fantastic talent developer. He's had multiple 1,000-yard rushers, a bunch of guys that were top 3 in receiving yards, touchdowns, things along those lines through his years at Ole Miss. Obviously, has worked with Hugh Freeze before, and Hugh Freeze's stint at Ole Miss, so there is some camaraderie there between those two guys. And then Auburn going out or promoting Kent Austin. He was a off-the-field analyst last year, so was with the team, but now he's been promoted to quarterbacks coach. He was quarterbacks coach for Liberty when Hugh Freeze was there, and worked with Malik Willis and produced Malik Willis to his career in over 5,000 passing yards, 1,800 rushing yards, 50-something or 70-something touchdowns, something along those lines in his 2 years there. So he's been proven to produce talent. He's been a head coach at the Canadian Football Leagues, won the Grey Cup, I believe is what it's called in the Canadian Football League. He's been a finalist for it a bunch of times. Everywhere he's been successful and has produced talent, played at Ole Miss. So getting guys like that who have proven themselves throughout their career more than 2 or 3 year stints. I mean, for a long period of time, these guys have been successful and proven that what they do works and that they can develop talent. I think that's was necessary. Obviously, losing Cadillac, losing Zach Etheridge, losing Trevon Reed, that hurts because they played at Auburn. They were, part of the family, more than a regular coach that just gets hired off the street or hired from another university is going to mean to the fans. You know what I mean? So it hurt, but it was necessary for sure, because the moves that a coach makes and a program makes from year 1 to year 2, in my opinion, is the most important year and building block year that there is in a coach's tenure. You see what you have in year 1, you see what you did well, you see what worked, and you see what didn't work, and what you need to fix, not just on the field and the product of the team playing on Saturdays, but what you need to do internally with your team, with your culture, with your coaching staff. The biggest jumps you have as a coach in your tenure is year 1 to year 2. I firmly believe that. And I think Hugh Freeze has done a fantastic job going out and building his coaching staff the way he needs it to be built and the way Auburn needs it to be built to be successful, especially in the new age of college football and how the SEC is opening up and there's 12-team playoffs. Everything's getting more competitive and everything means more now. So going and stacking his staff the way he has, I'm very thrilled and looking forward to next season. And I think Hugh Freeze is on the right track in this offseason, his first full offseason, doing a great job, finishing a top 10 recruiting class in his first full class. Now he's on to his second cycle for Auburn. I think he's doing a great job. It seems like he's got his mind, on the right track, and he is all the allegations and the bad things that came with Hugh Freeze and the stories around Hugh Freeze from years ago, I feel like that's all not part of him anymore. He's fully 100%. It seems like it anyway from the outside looking in. He's fully 100% only cares about college football, coaching college football, and doing what it takes to win. And you can say, well, the other stuff he did that he got in trouble for was doing whatever it took to win. But now you can legally pay players. Not you can't legally, give them the escorts like he was doing or whatever. But I don't think that the things that were holding him back and a dark spot on him, I don't think that is around him anymore. I think he's definitely refurbished his image for sure in the world of college football, and I think he's doing it the right way and the best way he thinks it needs to be done. But looking at the coaching staff, I think Auburn has a chance to make big steps forward this next year, and I'm just excited to see how it's going to look and how the team is going to operate. But the big thing from the end of the year, some media and some of the team talking to the media, it sounded like there was some culture problems, that not everybody on the team was bought in 100% fully. And there were some people butting heads about it. And so you see some guys transferring out, going different places and things along those lines. So I think this year, obviously, we're going to see what Auburn is going to be in the coming years, because if they can't fix the culture problem this year, then it's going to be a longer road to success than what Auburn is expecting it to be under Hugh Freeze, and what a lot of the college football world is expecting it to be under Hugh Freeze. Because if the same, culture problems keep rearing their head year after year, it's only going to be the same, and Auburn's going to be a mediocre team winning 9-10 games at their highest point. So I think what he's doing, he is focusing on building the program from the inside out, and not just picking pieces here and there and through the portal, which, he has done at times with a certain player here and there you need, but he's working fully going off of high school recruiting to build his program. And I think that he has done a great job for this first class, building his first full coaching staff and getting his relationships built and getting his team's trust behind him. I think the sky's the limit for him. I think he's doing everything the right way, and I'm excited to see how this 2024 football season is going to be for Auburn.
Yeah, I do think he took a big step forward on his coaching staff. I really like the addition of DJ Durkin. I mean, you just look at his track record. He's been a head coach. He's been around the SEC. And everywhere he's been, he's improved his defenses. I mean, you look at Ole Miss, and we talked about a couple years ago, man, if they could just take a step forward, look how good they would be. From 2020 to 2021, they were able to take that step and get so much better defensively. And look how their win total jumped. They got to double-digit wins, and then obviously goes to Texas A&M. They've had really solid defenses the last few years. So, he's kind of improved things everywhere he's been. He's got, like I said, head coaching experience, coordinating experience within this conference at multiple different stops. So to me, that was one of the biggest hires for him. That was actually just recently, just a few days ago. So love that hire for them. I think he was getting considered at multiple other places. Whether it was linebacker coach or defense coordinator, he was up for a lot of different positions. I think I think Saban may have been interviewing him the day he retired. I think that may have been one of the guys he was interviewing. Heard some rumors. I can't confirm that 100%, but I think he may have been interviewing him for linebackers coach, possibly, or even defensive coordinator, actually. So since Kevin Steele was retiring. So it was probably for defensive coordinator and probably coaching linebackers as well. So, yeah, I mean, this was somebody who was not only at Alabama or Auburn, but was highly sought after multiple different places. So like that hire a lot. Freeze is going to call plays next year, right? Because I think he's taking a bigger role.
That's what I understand.
Okay, yeah, that's what I heard. Like, I thought he was going to be calling plays. Obviously, I mean, he's had a long, career doing that and being I think last year, and I think this is what he realized is, you heard, after the bowl game, bad performance. He
That's
talked
putting it
about,
lightly.
yeah, I mean, he talked about, he was out recruiting. He wasn't really, involved in the game plan like he normally is. And I think that was something he realized after the season, or probably even before that, but realized that he needed to take a bigger role on that side of the ball to really get where they wanted to be. And that's kind of obviously that's his bread and butter. I mean, he's known as a great offensive coach. Um, so I'm not surprised that he's taking a bigger role in that. Getting Derek Nix from Ole Miss, is
Big time.
nice. A guy with a great track record. So, yeah, I like the moves they made. Um, I'm not crazy about Charles Kelly as a coach, but the dude can really recruit.
Oh
I'm not
yeah.
saying he's a bad coach or any means, but he's not my favorite, but I think he's going to do very well for what they need him to do. So he's going to be a great recruiter, which is a big reason why, and I think he'll do just fine. Um, but I like that addition to their staff as far as that perspective, because this was a guy that brought in a lot of great secondary talent while he was at Alabama. Um, and obviously that was an area they've always recruited well in, but he was a big part of that for several years. So I think that's a good addition from that perspective as well. But that defense is going to be really solid with
Oh,
Durkin
yeah.
at the helm. I mean, like I said, you've seen what he's done every stop he's been at, being able to improve defenses. And I think he's going to do really, really well. And I think, like you said, the jump from year one to year two, kind of putting your initial staff together. After your first year, you can really reevaluate things. Hey, what do we need to get better at? What's working? What's not? Who's really a fit for the future? Who's not? I think you find out a lot about that after a full calendar year of being together and going through a full season. You recognize that, and so I think you made the appropriate changes, and they're certainly much better now than they were, here a month and a half ago or so.
Oh yeah. Big time. I love the Derek Nix hire for sure because in his career, the running backs, because he's going to be the running backs coach the last, I believe, 3 years at Ole Miss. He was wide receivers coach, but prior to that, he was running backs coach. But the running backs that he's produced in his career as a coach in college is they've done outstanding. I mean, he's had multiple guys that are big name, big talent guys that go on to play at the next level, put up record breaking numbers, 1,000-yard rushers, things along those lines. So I'm excited what he's going to be able to do with Auburn's backfield because no matter what anybody says, that's the most talented position on Auburn's roster is the running back room. If every other position could get on the same page talent wise as the running back room, Auburn will be in good shape. Hopefully, in the coming years, it'll be like that. But right now, the best position group on Auburn football is 100% the running back room. So he's coming in inheriting a really, really good staple of running backs. So I think he's going to do a great job in his first year. And obviously, he has a bunch of SEC experience under his belt, 16 years. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do with our running back room.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like you said, running backs are deep, they're versatile. Yeah, I think they're going to be fine. That receivers with that talent that's coming in this year. Obviously, I think that's a room that struggled to say the least over the last few years, but mainly just because they've been lacking in talent. I
Yeah.
mean, that the talent has just not been there. What you need at this level, and they're obviously there's going to be some growing pains. I mean, you're going to be playing a lot of guys early, a lot of guys as freshmen, but for future that's going to be huge in their development. But it's like I said, it's going to take some patience, but the talent of that room is going up exponentially, and I think you're going to see a big jump in that room this year. And I'm very curious and excited to see what those guys can do. Um, Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, and company. I mean, like I said, a stat receiving class for them this year, and I think they're going to do some good things with that because that was an area that desperately needed an influx of talent.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, obviously, like you said before we started, Peyton Thorne, probably bottom tier at SEC quarterbacks, but having that group around him, that's going to make his job much, much easier.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it that he's in the lower tier. Now, the receivers definitely didn't help him out or bail him out at times last year, and the offensive line hurt him at times. But a lot of the things that happened to him and happened to the offense was because of him. He's got to get better. He knows he's got to get better. All the coaches know he's got to get better. Everybody in college football that watched more than one game for Auburn realizes that he's got a lot of room to improve. Not being a hater saying that, I'm just being, telling the truth, telling it how it is. And I think Peyton Thorne would even tell you that he's got to step it up. He has the ability to do it. We've seen him do it at Michigan State. We've seen him be successful there. He has the ability. It's just, can he get out of his own way, get out of his head, and play with some confidence and play to the fullest, the best of his ability. We've yet to see that at Auburn, so we'll find out. But I think he's going to make a leap forward this year, but I don't know if it's going to be enough to get Auburn to where fans want them to be.
Well, while we're kind of on the quarterback subject, I've been really wanting to talk about this for a little while now because kind of doing a little dive into it, seeing the potential starters for SEC teams going into 2024. Looking back at last year, obviously Jaden Daniels, Heisman winner. He's going to the NFL. I mean, the best player in college football last year had a fantastic season. Spencer Rattler going to the league, had a really nice couple years for South Carolina. Joe Milton, so had some moments, but wasn't able to live up to what Hendon Hooker was able to do and what I think Nico's going to be able to do for them this year and moving forward. Will Rogers, obviously SEC's all-time leading passer, but he's gone now to another conference. I think he's staying at Washington, I believe.
Is he really? I knew he entered the transfer portal again, but I didn't know if he ever left or decided to stay.
I can't remember. I want to say he ended up staying at Washington, I think, because he committed to DeBoer, but I think he's still there. I'm not 100% on that. But kind of getting into this next year's class of quarterbacks, you're adding Texas and OU. I mean, I look at just what's returning. Carson Beck, Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Quinn Ewers. I mean, honestly, top to bottom, this is probably one of the best quarterback groups I've seen the SEC have. I think it's got a great mix of returning guys, of young guys, of kind of wild cards, I guess you could say. I'm gonna pull these up and I'm gonna go through. These aren't my power rankings. I'm just going to read through them. We don't have to put them in any kind of order right now. But obviously, got Brock starting at the bottom, towards the bottom. Brock Vandergriff at Kentucky. That guy this year is going into the year at least is in your bottom tier of SEC quarterbacks.
That's crazy.
That shows
overall or 5-star overall recruit.
Yeah, that shows the depth of this league this year at the quarterback spot. Lenore Sellers, South Carolina, probably the projected starter going into 24. I think he's going to break out. They're very high on him at South Carolina. He's been there a few years, been able to sit and develop. I believe he's about 6'3", 6'4", 240, absolute load at quarterback. I think he's going to do some good things. They brought in Robbie Ashford, but I don't think Robbie's going to be able to beat him out. I think he's just there to kind of push him a little bit. Taylon Green, the Boise State transfer at Arkansas, coming in, has had decent numbers last year at Boise State, but I think there's some upside there they can tap into. Peyton Thorne at Auburn. We'll see if he can take another step. He's going to have some more talent next year. I think things are going to be set up much better for him to be able to do that. But that's kind of your bottom tier. Diego Javia, the New Mexico State quarterback. You probably get some PTSD from that name. That guy's going to be the quarterback at Vanderbilt. He transferred in there. Obviously had a really nice year last year. Almost 3,000 yards, 26 touchdowns. almost 1,000 yards rushing. But that's a
He's
guy
a
was,
baller.
yeah, I mean, he was a really good player for them. You look at Blake Shapen, Mississippi State, guy that's been a starter at Baylor, runs that air raid that Jeff Levy loves. So I think that's a guy that had a solid year last year. Yeah, almost 300 attempts. He had 2,100 yards, 13 touchdowns, but um, he missed part of the year last year, so I was in limited time. Then you get into your kind of top 10, or at least in these rankings. Top 10, Jackson Arnold, 5-star. I mean, a guy that Oklahoma was so confident in that Dylan Gabriel is now at Oregon. A guy
Mm.
that was a well above average Power 5 starting quarterback who's had 3-4 years of experience is now gone because they believe in this kid so much. And I think he's going to have a nice year, first year as a starter. Really excited to see him play and them jumping in the SEC. So I can't wait to see Jackson Arnold this year. Connor Weigman, everybody's kind of forgetting about him a little bit just because of these other names on the list. He's
And he
injured,
didn't play the last, I think, 5, 6 weeks of the season. He got hurt in the Auburn game,
got
first half of the
hurt,
Auburn game, right before half.
was having a really good year, obviously until that happened, and think he's due for a huge year. As hopefully he'll get a full season with the Reins. Graham Mertz at Florida had a great year last year.
Hey, he proved me wrong. He said
Seven,
handoff specialist. What'd you say? I'm gonna toss this pill around a yard.
a 73% completion percentage, 2,900 yards, 20 touchdowns to 3 picks. He was one of the few bright spots for Florida last year by far. So I thought he really impressed his first year in the SEC. Garrett Nussmeier, we've been high on the Nuss bus. Obviously stepping into some big shoes there in Baton Rouge, but he's ready to come out throwing absolute flames.
They're not going to be disappointed with him. I'm telling you right now, they're not.
One of the biggest arms in the SEC, so they believe in him a lot. So I'm expecting big things from Garrett Nussmeier, and kudos to him because he's waited his turn. It could have been very easy for him to bail out, go to another school, especially this day and age. But I want to give him a lot of credit because he stuck it out and sat, really 2 years that he could have been starting somewhere else. Honestly, I mean, he's got the talent, he's got the upside to be able to start just about anywhere in the country. So I want to give him a lot of credit for hanging in there, and I think he's going to be rewarded for that with a really big year this year. Nico, I'm leaving. I think, obviously, you look at what Hendon Hooker did rewriting the record books there at Tennessee with Josh Heupel. I think this is the next guy in line to be able to live up to that kind of potential and those kind of expectations. Obviously, Joe Milton, hit or miss. Mm-hmm. I didn't ever expect him to really get to that level. This is a guy I think is going to get to that level. That running that, I think you're going to see that Tennessee offense you would expect under Nico with Josh Heupel than last year's version of Tennessee offense. I think we're going to get more back to 2022, what you would expect from a Josh Heupel, Tennessee offense. I think he's due for a huge sophomore, his first year as a starter. He's got a bright future ahead of him. Brady Cook, man, I thought he way exceeded my expectations.
And I think he's a top 3 returner for sure. A top 3 returning quarterback in the SEC. I think you can make solid arguments that he's a top 3 guy.
In part, big reason why Missouri took the step forward they did this year.
Oh, yeah.
He was a huge reason in that. Jalen Milroe returning to Alabama, obviously. I do think I don't want to just hand the job to him because I do think there's, with a new staff coming in, a whole new offense, it's more of a level playing field. I mean, obviously everybody expects him to be the starter. And I think that's going to be the case, but a little bit different scenario with a new staff coming in and really a totally new offense. So he doesn't really have quite the head start that a normal starter would have over the rest of the quarterback room. So I do think there will be some open competition because this new staff, they're not familiar with any of these guys. This is their first time getting their hands on them. You know, they didn't recruit most of these guys, or if any of them. They did bring Austin Mack, a quarterback from Washington that does know this offense some. So, but he's not going to have quite the leg up that maybe a typical starter would have. But expecting some really good things from him next year. Then Jackson Dart, what he's done the last 2 years at Ole Miss. I mean, I think he's going to have another huge year, especially those weapons around him. I'm expecting fireworks all year from that Ole Miss offense. They're going to be as fun as anybody to watch. Quinn Ewers at Texas. I mean, obviously, enough said. One of the best quarterbacks in the country. Going to be another explosive offense for Texas, and coming in the SEC. What better guy to have than Quinn Ewers, one of the best in college football. And then obviously Carson Beck coming off a huge year, deciding to return for another year at Georgia to kind of raise his draft stock even more. But you just go down that list. I mean, I just rattled off 16 names there. The depth of this quarterback spot, like I said, with young upside talent and Arnold and Nico and Brock Vandegrift and some of those guys, and then the returning veterans of Beck, Ewers, Milroe, Dart, Brady Cook. The depth and the talent and the depth and the experience of this quarterback group as a whole it's about as deep as I can ever remember personally.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the names that you said, lots of them are going to be playing on Sundays. They're going to be playing against each other. Some of them may be on the same team, backing each other up. But, yeah, the depth in SEC at the quarterback position is probably the deepest it's ever been in SEC's history, which is saying something because there's been some great names come through the SEC at the quarterback position, obviously, but all at the same time going to be playing against each other week in, week out. That's what makes this so special. I mean, we're going to get some big name matchups every single solitary week, more than we've seen, obviously, ever. So I'm super excited with this. But when you were talking about the teams and, just DeBoer and Milroe and Quinn Ewers and all this, it made me think. I saw something the other day. Obviously, most people know this without seeing it, but it was very interesting to me. Of the 4 teams that were in the playoffs this year, only one team is returning their head coach. So Saban retired. Harbaugh dipped and went to the Chargers. DeBoer left Washington, went to Alabama. So he's at a team that was in the playoffs. He's just not a head coach of the team he was. And then Sarkisian at Texas. So Sarkisian is the only coach to stay with the team or stay with his team that was in the playoffs this past year, which is really, really I guess it is crazy, obviously, but it's just more funny than anything. But because of that rarely happens when you get the 4 best teams and then 3 of the coaches leave, or, one retires and then 2 of them leave. It's just that's very rare that happens. I think it's just what the college football world is today. And then I was listening to Mac and Cube earlier this week, and they're saying that there's a lot of reports from coaches that they've talked to. Obviously, they didn't share names, but from coaches they've talked to and some of the analysts and stuff around college football and the people they've talked to, there's a lot of belief that in the next few years you could see a lot of coaches jumping ship and going to the NFL because of the way that college football is today and all the things you have to juggle. You can't just coach football and draw up schemes and be the best coordinator or be the best linebackers coach or be the best head coach and just worry about football. You're having to do so many other things that coaching football falls like 7th or 8th most important on your list as a head coach or as a coordinator and things like that. So they're saying that it's a possibility that more coaches in the college level are going to be jumping ship going to the NFL because you work 7 to 8 months out of the year. It's nothing but football. There's rules and regulations in place to keep your roster intact so you know what you got going into the next year. There's nobody tampering with your players. You don't have to recruit your roster. You go to work and you coach football. And when you want to think about something that has to do with football, you actually only have to think about football. You don't have to think about, well, if we do this, we're going to have to fight and recruit our guy to come back to us so he doesn't leave and go to the portal because we changed his position or because somebody beat him out of this position. It's, well, they're tied here through a contract. They have to be here, so you can just worry about the X's and O's of the game. And they're saying that, obviously with the NFL, the way that they're paying coaches now is pretty compatible and comparable with how they're being paid in college. So people are going to go and leave and get paid the same, if not just a little bit less, but they get to work 7 to 8 months out of the year and actually do what they want to do rather than have to be this politician, so to say, and keep everybody happy and weigh out the boosters and be with the boosters and make them happy, but make your team happy, make your fans happy. Obviously, keeping yourself happy and being successful on the field, along with all those other things, talking to the NIL and all those things, or keeping up with the NIL and making sure all that's square away. I mean, it's just coaches today in college are having to wear so many hats, especially if you're a head coach or a coordinator, because so much spotlight is on you and everything, all your success goes through, it comes from your guys. And if your guys are jumping ship and hitting the portal every other year, it makes it a lot harder to keep that sustained success. So the headache is really just not worth what they're having to deal with at the college level, is what a lot of coaches are saying, is what is being reported anyhow. So unless it is fixed in the next few years, there could be a lot of new names and new faces in college football in the coaching ranks.
Yeah, I think they're exactly right. I think you're already seeing that take place to a certain extent. And I think over the next year or two, I think you're going to see it even more. Boston College head coach, he goes, I believe he's the defense coordinator for the Packers now. He left and went, obviously kind of expected, but Harbaugh goes to the Chargers.
And it's expected that his son is going to leave Michigan to go be the Seahawks special teams coordinator.
Yeah, Jesse Minter, his defense coordinator at Michigan, he's obviously following him to the Chargers, same position. I mean, there's a lot of examples of it, and I think you're only going to see it rise here in the next couple of years because, I mean, as you laid out, now in the current college climate, these coaches, they're spending probably 70-80% of their time not coaching football.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, like if you break down their responsibilities in a pie chart, I guarantee a very small sliver of that is actual coaching, and about 70 to 80% of it is re-recruit your own roster, recruiting, obviously, in general, which you have to do anyways, and your typical responsibilities, but then, NIL deals. Well, Kevin Steele, he was on Feinbaum recently talking about,
good interview.
A guy that they were recruiting, not naming any names. He's like, well, coach, man, we love you, love the program, love the staff. I mean, everything's perfect. Basically,
we know we can get developed there and go to the league. That was said to him.
Yeah, but it's like your number's not close to what I'm getting from X, Y, or Z school,
right? And
it's just there's so much, and obviously the coaches are legally not supposed to talk numbers with that, and especially assistant coaches may not even be involved in what the numbers are, so to speak, for a certain guy. So it's just very jumbled up. And like I said, now under the current climate, coaches are spending very little time actually coaching football. Mm-hmm. And the NFL now is a much easier coaching job than it is in college, especially the way it is now. So it's just making it easier and easier for guys to jump ship. And like you said, the pay scale has tightened. So you're not taking a huge pay cut or anything like that to go coach in the NFL. So I think you're going to see it even more and more. I think it's going to burn a lot of coaches out early that would have much longer shelf lives that are not going to hang around as long because it's so taxing on them. I think we're due, and just kind of hearing people talk, I think you're going to see some surprise names jump that maybe you wouldn't expect that are going to jump from college.
I think the biggest one that I've always said will never leave college football, that now I think has a chance to leave college football in the next year or two, is Kirby Smart. I've always said there's no way Kirby leaves Georgia. He's built that program from the bottom up. There's no way he leaves there. He is now the best head coach in college football. There's no debate about it as of right now in today's world. But with what we both just laid out, I don't know that I want to deal with that. You've already proven yourself. You've won back to back. You've played in three. You've been in the playoffs ample amount of times. You're always in the mix at the very end of the year, so they know you're worth a crap. You've proven yourself as a college coach. Well, you don't want to deal with all that other BS. You just want to coach football now. He might jump ship and go to the NFL. That will be the name that shocks me the most. Of all the names out there, names, might be shocking, but that name, Kirby Smart, would shock me the most. And I think it's a possibility that it could happen in the next 2 to 3 years if there's not some regulations put on the way college football is operating right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are going to see some guys that are, like I said, that probably normally wouldn't jump ship that are probably going to make that jump. I think that's very, very possible. And Kirby's even laid out in the past that, you're not going to, I don't think you're going to see him hang around like a Saban hung around.
Yeah,
like,
no, not until he said
Kirby's became, Kirby's young now, has already had great success. He's not a guy to me that's going to coach until he's 73. No. Like, I think Kirby's going to hang it up way earlier because, like I said, under the current climate, unless it gets much better, much quicker, I think it's going to burn a lot of guys out much, much faster now. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, the NFL's becoming a much easier coaching job because you're actually spending your time coaching, and not, doing all these other tasks that don't really pertain to football on the field.
Right.
So,
right.
So I'm really curious to see how that, and I hope it doesn't happen, man, because you want the best quality coaches in the game that you possibly can get. And there's always going to be quality. I mean, like, there's always going to be great coaches and things like that. But, you don't want your product to take a hit because the system in place is so bad that, it's almost incentivizing guys to go coach in the NFL that probably wouldn't otherwise. So, going to be fascinating to watch for sure. And I kind of want to tie that into a conversation about the SEC and the Big Ten just came out this past Friday about them creating their leadership of the SEC and the Big Ten, creating an advisory group to basically come up with solutions for the current problems facing college football, collegiate sports in general. Thought that was really interesting, and a lot of people were thinking, hey, that's the first step to them possibly breaking away from the NCAA, kind of forming their own governing body, because the NCAA has lost all power whatsoever. They have no authority over anything. And you've heard over the last few weeks, if you've been keeping up a little bit, the NCAA launching some investigations into some NIL situations, or some illegal NIL dealings. I don't even know how they even come up with that, because I'm like, this system's so backwards. How can you even tell what's illegal and not? They launched an investigation into Tennessee, and credit Danny White, because his statement pretty much just put a blowtorch to the NCAA. I thought it was pretty funny. I think they launched one into Virginia, I believe. So a couple schools they're kind of being investigated for NIL. I don't even know if you could say corruption, but I think that's just going to further fracture the relationship, even more so than it already is, between, SEC, Big Ten, these power conferences, and the NCAA. Like I said, the NCAA has lost all authority. So I think this is probably just the beginning stages of them forming their own governing body, maybe their own league, kind of, so to speak. And I think they're already discussing possible, revenue sharing possibilities, kind of like an employment agreement in a sense, because, like I said, the current model, as everybody knows, is unsustainable for the future of collegiate athletics. So it's good to see that they're working together to kind of come up with solutions. Tony Petitti is the Big Ten commissioner. Obviously, Greg Sankey with the SEC. they have a good working relationship. And so I think that was a big driving force in creating this committee and this partnership between the two power leagues. And as I stated earlier, with conference realignment, I think we're far from over yet. I mean, we've already talked about in the past Florida State. They want out of the ACC. I think teams like North Carolina, Clemson, Virginia Tech, teams like that are going to follow suit behind them if at all possible. So, and I think too, ESPN plays a big role in this because everybody's talking about, well, they can't leave the ACC yet because of grant of rights. Well, the ACC has their grant of rights with the ACC, and obviously now the SEC has a big television deal now with ESPN also. So I think that's going to open some doors. I think they're going to find some ways to work around that grant of rights deal. So I do think whether it's maybe a few more months down the road, whether it's next year, but I think some more conference realignments right around the corner. Yeah. And I think the SEC and the Big Ten obviously are right there to be able to pounce on that and grow their leagues even stronger. And I think that's going to even further solidify them kind of forming their own governing body and kind of breaking away from the NCAA. Because as I said, the authority is just not there anymore. It's a banana republic, honestly.
Mm-hmm. I think that to fix all this needs to be for sure guaranteed. You can only transfer one time. That's it. You cannot transfer again. If you transfer again, you have to sit out for a full, complete year like it used to be back in the day or whatever. There's no free range transferring. I think that if they're going to keep up with the NIL and the way it's going right now, they need to have an open market and everybody can see what everyone is being paid. And that if you are going to accept an NIL deal, you have to sign a contract to stay through X amount of time, whether that be a full season, whether that be 2 full seasons. If you don't stay through that full 2 seasons, you no longer get the money, or you have to reimburse half the money you made, or all whatever rules they make. They need to do so in the sense of keeping kids at a school that they choose. Now, can you make a wrong decision and you end up hating it and you hate your coach, you hate your teammates, you're not in a good place and you want to transfer? Sure. But then you can't transfer again if you hate the next place, or if you're not getting paid enough, or somebody's coming in and quote unquote tampering with you. You can't just jump ship and leave again because you had the ability to. I think that needs to be nipped in the bud, but being open with the amount of money that's being thrown around and actually being used, because there was a report that I've talked about this on the podcast before. There was a report about 2 months ago. I cannot remember who wrote it, but it was about the Texas A&M 2021 recruiting class, and everybody's believing that all these guys are making hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then it comes out, one of their players says, y'all thought that we were making hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we didn't ever see a dime of it, because these kids are recruited or being recruited out of the transfer portal or out of high school, and they're being told by so-and-so that they're going to pay them $25,000 to come play here, or to, be a part of the program. Okay, well, they're being told $25,000. Well, then their agent or whoever is marketing them around, shopping them around, is going to tell another team, well, this team's offering $75,000 to play. What are you going to offer? When really, in reality, it's $25,000, but they're bumping it up a $50,000 cushion to get their guys more money. And then this team says, okay, well, if they're going to offer them 75, we'll offer them 75. And then they'll go to a different school and say, well, they're offering 125. So it's just the numbers that are being reported are not real. They're not set in stone contracted numbers. They're just willy-nilly being thrown out there because that's what people are saying, and they're not the actual numbers that is being placed. If you're going to do this and pay these kids, it needs to be an open market, just like the MLB is, just like the NBA is, just like the NFL is, where you can see how much each person is making, and there needs to be a cap for teams. If you're going to pay them out of the NIL collective, there needs to be a cap for teams. Now, then the players can go make their own money on the outside, which through NIL, which is how it was originally intended to do. You go market yourself like Dakota's Crawford did with the HVAC company. He went out and he's doing, Dakota's company, whatever his catchphrase was for them. That's not being given from the the college's NIL collective, that is being given from that HVAC company. And if he wants to go out and do that through that HVAC company, by all means, you can do like a DJ Uyunglele did and go sign a deal with Dr. Pepper and be in the Dr. Pepper commercials, and he can make money through that. That's not coming from Clemson's NIL collective. So if they're going to be getting paid money from the schools and the collective, there needs to be a salary cap on what can be made for the whole team from that collective. And then the rest of what is being made for these players, they go out and get on their own, like it was intended to be in the very beginning, like when Bo Nix did it with Milo's, and when like DJ did it with Dr. Pepper and things along those lines. So I just think that we've opened up a can of worms for college football. You give somebody an inch every single time when it's this big, they're going to take a mile. And in this case, they've taken 100 miles. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous, the can of worms that's been opened in college football. But obviously, I don't have all the answers, but I think that potentially having some rules along those lines could help a little bit and can maybe draw it back and bring it back in, rein it in a little bit from where it is right now. And I could be totally off base about this. This is just my opinion and what I've thought about as, the years have gone on with this NIL and the monkey that it's become.
I thought it was funny. Deion Sanders was talking about the portal. He said, man, I forgot what number. He said it was like 50,000 or 75,000. He said, man, that won't even get you a walk on now.
Yeah.
He's like, what would be easier if guys just entered the portal and just put their price out beside their name. Yeah. He's like, that way I know if I need a full of them or not,
Yeah.
But I do want to say too, I appreciate you bringing up Dakota Crawford because I've not thought about him in a while. So I looked up where's Dakota Crawford at now? He is at Louisiana Tech.
Okay.
So keep out for.
Wasn't he at Nebraska? He transferred from Nebraska?
He did, yeah. He wasn't there very long.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, man, I hadn't thought about that name in a minute. I'm glad you reminded me of that. But I'm rooting for Dakotas to have a very good.
That's what NIL was supposed to do. You can come to school here and then you can use your name, image, and likeness to make money. It's not, we're going to pay you money so you will come play here. It's, you come play here, and now that you've got a name for yourself, then you can go make money on your own doing advertisements or whatever it may be, or going on a radio show or go into this event and speaking and signing autographs or whatever it is. But it was never intended for the collectives. When that came out of the blue, the NIL collective came overnight, it seemed like, because it was meant to be go do it yourself, go brand yourself, market yourself where you can make money through your name, image, and likeness. Now it has turned into, oh, you're a good football player. We want you to come play for Miami. We want you to come play for Florida State. We want you to come play for Auburn, Alabama, whatever. We're going to sign you this big of a check if you'll come play here. Oh, they're offering you that much? We'll double it. Come play here. It's just, that was never what it was intended to be. Now, everyone with half a brain cell knew that's what it was going to develop into, but that was never the intention of it. And they let it go, and they checked off on the NIL way too fast before they ever really looked into it and studied of how can this get out of hand, or how can we, put regulations on this to where it doesn't get out of hand and it is used for the intention that it was supposed to be used for, and not just stroking checks out in front of everybody because there's no punishment for it now.
Yeah, that's it. And like I said too, I don't as we talked about so many times here, I don't know what the real solution is, or if a solution's coming, quick enough. But
or can you even rein it back in at all, or is it just this is how it's going to be forever? Is there even a way to do it?
Yeah, I think they'll eventually get it under wraps, because I think it's like anything. A lot of times it has to get to a certain point where it goes like, okay, we've had enough. Like, it's gotten bad enough to where you go, okay, man, we got to come up with a solution here. I do think we'll get to that point probably sooner rather than later, honestly. So I do think there will be some sort of solution. Or
do you think that comes from the NCAA or college football as a whole, or do you think that comes from the people writing the checks to the collective saying, I'm tired of giving $5 million a year for us to go get crummy players that leave it or at the end of the year. Or I'm tired of stroking this check to pay this kid that's going to leave at the end of the year or not perform like the way we expected him to. Because I tell you right now, if I was a big guy stroking a big old check and my team was giving this money out to players who leave after 2 years or who don't perform really well, I would stop giving that much money, or I would say, hey, don't use this money for that. Use it for something else. Do you think it comes from the guys writing the checks, or do you think it comes from the programs or NCAA as a whole?
I think, I mean, I do think in a certain stance, I think the guys writing the checks and the big boosters and stuff, I do think they're going to get tired of that, honestly, especially if it's not,
Benefiting.
return on their
Yeah.
investment like they want. Obviously, it depends on how their program's doing. I think it's going to come more from the like a different revenue share, like a revenue sharing model, or I don't think the solution's going to come from the NCAA because, like I said before, I mean it's at the point now where they're pretty much obsolete. Like they have no authority, no power, no nothing. I mean they're just
Like a
there.
substitute
Honest,
teacher. They're there, but nobody respects them.
Yeah. I mean that's a very good comparison because I think the solution's coming from whether it's the SEC and the Big Ten coming together, forming their own entity, so to speak, or I think the solution's more likely to come from there. I don't think the NCAA's all they've done is just dumped a big mess everywhere.
Yeah.
They're like a 4-year-old child. They just come in, raise hell and leave. Like I mean that was it. Like literally they threw a rager, they left debris and a mess everywhere, and they said, "Okay, y'all clean it up." Like
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's a disaster. So I think there's next to no chance they come up with any solutions. So we'll see what happens, but
Do you
at
think
this point, I don't see it from them.
what do you mean by the revenue share? You mean like signing a TV deal with the conference and every player makes an X amount of money off that, or starters make this, bench players make this? Is something along those lines, or would it be something like Golden Flake is one of Auburn's sponsors? Would it be like that, like your sponsorship for your whatever school you have? Each player gets a percentage of that, like as an employee or something along those lines.
I think it would be more of like um, the revenue the institutions make off like TV deals, and
Okay.
obviously, I think like their whatever revenue that the school makes, I think they negotiate to where the student athletes will get X amount of percentage of this, and that'll equal out to each scholarship player or each player on the team. Like they'll get X amount of dollars. I think they'll negotiate because, like I said, once you get into employment agreements, you get into collective bargaining agreements and things of that nature, where the players will have representation, negotiating on their behalf, kind of like
Yeah.
unions do for corporations, and employees are part of unions and they negotiate on their behalf. And I think you'll get into that situation, but I think the players will share X amount of whatever the total revenue is for the athletic departments of these
And
institutions.
that could get confusing too, because obviously football and basketball they bring in the money. Football way higher than basketball, but football and basketball are up here. Then you got baseball, soccer, softball. Some teams have equestrian, even though that's not an NCAA sport. Some teams have equestrian, golf, volleyball, indoor volleyball, outdoor volleyball, swimming and diving, things like that. Those are all athletes too, but they're not. That would be like paying a janitor the same amount as you're paying the CEO of that company that janitor works for. So it's not the same. So that's going to be another battle they're going to have to fight from within and sort out. Now, do I think that baseball and softball players deserve to make the same cut that football and basketball players do? No, because they're not bringing it. They're not the reason that revenue is so high. So do you think it goes off sports, like the football revenue is this and that's this thing and that goes to the football players? Basketball revenue is here, that goes to the basketball players, baseball, softball, volleyball, so on and so forth? Or do you think it's all one big if it goes this way, do you think it's all one big pile of money that gets divvied out equally between all the sports? Because like there's a report that came out, Ole Miss women's basketball loses money every year. Not
Yeah.
hating on them, it's just a fact they lose money every year. So do those girls deserve to be paid the same amount as their men's basketball team? Probably not. But in this scenario that we're talking about, would they be paid the same amount, even though they lose money every year while the men's team brings in money?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair question for sure. I mean, um, I would say I don't think they would be probably. I mean, I think the higher revenue sports would get more of a cut. I mean, that would kind of make sense. Um, because like you said, I mean, really, when you're talking about these schools around the country, there's only really the only three profitable ones. Baseball is a little bit profitable
Mm-hmm.
at schools. I think referencing the Ole Miss that report that you're talking about,
Right.
I think their baseball team basically broke even. I think they made maybe 100,000,
Yeah.
maybe. I mean, it was
Mississippi State
very,
probably makes a little bit because they're one of the better ones, and Vandy probably makes a lot for baseball. But other than that, you're right.
yeah. I mean, so you're looking give or take probably breaking even for
Mm-hmm.
most people, breaking even maybe a little ahead, maybe a little below, but probably around the break even point for the most part. Men's basketball, a little bit more. It's profitable most places, especially at your bigger schools.
Mm-hmm.
Not a ton. I mean, it's not like crazy or anything, but probably, I think I read a report one time, maybe, $1 million, 2 million, like, it's got a little profitability to it. But outside of, and obviously football is way up there. Outside of those three, all the other ones will lose
Yeah.
a lot, women's basketball, golf, like stuff like that. Like most of those, lose money to operate. So, yeah, I would think it would be more like, some of those more revenue sports would get a little bit more. But honestly, I have no idea. I'm glad I'm not the one that's got to come
Yeah.
up with these solutions. And I was, as I was telling you earlier, about the SEC and Big Ten, like I'm sure they would rather not have to form their own governing body or alliance, so to speak. Like, I'm sure they would rather let the NCAA try to handle it. I think they just know that's not feasible because, I mean, they're going off on this venture together. Like, all this is going to do is create more work and more headache for them trying to come up with these solutions. Like, now there's probably if they do form their own body or entity, there's going to be a lot more money out there for them.
Yeah.
But in the same sense, more money, more headache as well. So I think they probably would rather, let somebody else handle it. But I think at this point they realize that's probably not feasible.
Yeah. The NCAA it's been a joke for a long time, but the last 7 to 8 years, it's become extremely laughable. They're really just there as they're on the pedestal. It says NCAA, but they really
They're a
don't do anything.
figurehead, basically.
Yeah, 100%. They don't do a damn thing. They're just there to look pretty and say that they're there. So
Yeah.
I mean, regardless of what happens, I am I want to know what it's going to look like when it does get fixed, because eventually, like you said, it's going to get fixed. It's the pendulum always swings. It's going to come back. It is going to come back, and then something else in 25 years is going to make us say, "Well, this is going to ruin college football. This is going to make college football so much different." It might change it for a year or two, but the pendulum is always going to swing back. I just want to know what's going to happen to cause the pendulum to swing back the other way.
Yeah, me too. I'm hoping, like I said, that sooner rather than later, but we'll see what happens. And kind of like I said, I think there's a lot left to be, um, a lot left to be settled. I think back to a Josh Pate tweet when he was out in Pasadena for the Rose Bowl, and he said, what he was hearing, like there was a lot of big players in college football, and everyone agreed like there were big changes on the horizon, like there were certain tipping points that had been hit that everybody was almost an alliance, like, hey, something big's going to happen, like something's going to kind of break, so to speak. So that was on, I believe, December 30th when he sent that out. He's kind of been touching on that recently, but I do think there's going to be some kind of clarity, maybe on at least some aspects of it. Like I said, whether that's conference realignment, the NCAA's role, with the NIL transfer portal. So, yeah, lot to be discussed, and lot's going to happen here over the next, 6-7 months as we get around to football season again.
Absolutely. You got anything else you want to cover?
I think I'm good, man. Appreciate everyone tuning in to us. It's good to be back after a little hiatus and get back in the groove of things.
Cam's a married man now. Listeners who don't know that, Cam has been married for 2 weeks now.
Yep.
Back from his honeymoon 2 weeks ago.
Had some business to attend to, and you're doing this from another state. So
yep. I've moved. I'm in Tennessee now. So we got any listeners in Tennessee, you see me around, give me some shit.
So yeah, we both had some big life events happening recently, and appreciate everyone's patience as we get back around here. But really appreciate everyone tuning in. Like I said, it's going to be a fun year leading into 2024. Got a lot to talk about, and we'll see y'all back next week.
Thank you, guys.